The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Welcome everybody, we are here, live, under the match radio. This is your host, Tech, here on another exclusive Skype interview. This interview is recorded live, of course. The date is as you've seen on the flyer, but this is an extra interview as it is May the 20th, 2023. I'm here, of course, with the man himself. Everyone has heard his voice. They know his voice. They emulated his voice. Everyone's wondering who is he, but we get to see the man himself. He is a great person. He's done, of course, the voice of the NWO. He's also helped contribute to great books such as Nitro. His Twitter is at his secrets of NWO. He's been a TV producer not only for WCW, during the good years, the bad years, the ugly years. He's also done producing work for TV and for the WWE. Great TV experience. He loves his mom, loves his family, has great hair. And we're bringing in none other than the man himself, Neal Pruitt, better known as the NWO voice guy. How are you doing today?
New World Order. Doing terrifically. Thanks, Tech. Appreciate you having me on, man.
No
My
problem.
mother was very influential in my life. Sweet lady. Still living. Got to see her for around Mother's Day. And she's just a wonderful lady. She's 96 years old. Shout out to Irene Pruitt in Warren, Ohio. And also my son's mom. Still keep in contact with her and so thankful for her contribution and all the mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Happy Mother's Day to, if I can call her Mama Pruitt, to your mom. And we talked off air and you text me and said, hey, I'm going to visit my mom and take care of her. And I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
Took care of my mom. She had a red illness for 4 or 5 years. Washed her, clothed her, and you only get one mom. She's the reason why I got into wrestling in the 80s. NWA days.
That's right. Yeah.
They came here at least once a month. So definitely shout out to your mom and shout out to the mother of your son. You don't hear a lot of that. Co-parenting is what you call it, and it's all about coming together as a mother and father, and also a mom and a dad, because it's differences.
Oh yeah.
Be a mother and a father, but being a mom and a dad is a relationship, and it's good that you and her still have that connection with your son. And even though y'all may not be together anymore, and that happens in life, you still want to make sure that your son is okay, because you definitely need both roles, male and female.
Takes two for sure.
No problem. Shout out to her. Now, you in the back, you got grass, you got trees, you got the air.
Got the meadow back here behind me.
Yes.
Feeling good today. A little bit hotter here in Atlanta, but it's fine.
Are you in the ATO?
I am.
In the ATO, Atlanta. Now, are you in the city of Atlanta, or are you more so like the outskirts of suburban?
Or the outskirts, yep. OTP, they call it. Outside the perimeter.
All right. Gotta give a shout out to my cousin D Dizzle and her husband G, Big G, who lives in Atlanta outskirts, and big wrestling fans they are too.
Oh, very good.
Now you're in Atlanta. Now we know Atlanta is one of the big hotbeds, one of the most influential, famous cities in wrestling. Mm-hmm. So for you, Neal, when you think of Atlanta, where you still live at today, in wrestling, what are some of the first things that comes to your mind?
Working at CNN Center was pretty exciting. That's where we actually edited a lot of the shows when I first started. We did a lot of interviews out of the really small studio that we had there, but we had a cameraman who was just fantastic named Bill Tinsley. Shout out to Bill out there in West Texas. And he did a great job lighting in the studio and all the control centers we did with Eric Bischoff and all the different things that we did with like Gene Okerlund and Bobby Heenan in that studio, and all the editing we did with Rob Wright and mostly Kemper Rogers I worked with. He's the guy that helped me with the NWO look and everything. And I just remember so many good times going in at, decided to start work at 7 a.m. And then we supposedly got off at 3, but we never did. And then we later moved to a lot of time fixing the shows and things like that all aired all the way across the world. It was exciting to be involved at CNN Center and to edit there and have our headquarters right there in that big building.
It's great. That is definitely is great. Shout out to those that you mentioned. Some of the names we all know. Some of them are what you would call unsung heroes because they weren't on TV or
Right.
back in the day. I remember wrestling had credits where you saw
Right.
a second producer. You don't see that no more. You see copyright WWE,
Well, we
copyright.
had to stop all that, actually.
Oh man.
That could have been us. We had so many complaints and so many whiny babies about the different credits that were at the end of our pay-per-views. One day they just said, you know what? Just don't even put them on there. Just cut them all off. So, yeah, at first we had like the Clash of the Champions and things like that. We often had different titles. I was lucky enough to be on several of those and pay-per-views, and they just at one point just said, no, we're not even going to put it up there. We're just going to put a copyright there. And speaking of copyright, it was interesting because the last Nitro was in Panama City. I was standing next to Ric Flair when we saw the WWE come across the lower part of the screen, World Wrestling Entertainment, or WWF at the time. I'm sorry. That was really weird.
Is you mentioned the credits is it's important. And to the younger fans, we have fans all over the world that may not remember because now it's just copyright. WWE, AEW, MLW, New Japan, anything you watch, copyright, boom, that's it.
Right.
But I was telling a cousin of mine watching old stuff a year ago. I said, "You see that name?" I said, "Neal Pruitt." I knew your name from our good buddy Eric Bischoff. Shout out to you, Eric, supporter, friend of the show. I said, "You know who Virgil Runnels is?" He was like, "No." I said, "Yeah, you do." "Who's that?" "Dusty Rhodes." Oh my God. So he would go through every person, like, who's this, who's that? I'm like, I really don't know. So it was cool back in the day before the internet, before cell phones and
Yeah.
Twitter and Twitch. You see names, if you weren't in the know or did tape trading, you thought you didn't know who Virgil Runnels was. You didn't know.
Yeah. He was an executive producer. Yep.
Right, executive producer. You didn't know who some of these people were when they were
What a great
using
guy.
their shoot names now instead of the kayfabe. So that was great.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Dusty was so fun to work with, and shout out to his family doing really well in AEW, and I
Yes.
see Cody every now and then, and Dustin every now and then, and it's always great to see them both, and just terrific people, and so glad for Dustin becoming a grandpa recently. So.
Oh, congratulations to Dustin. We've had the honor to meet Dustin a few times at a few local shows. Shout out to Dan McDevitt, MCW, and great guy. Matt Cody a couple of times. He was with RH. Randy as well. Just great with the people. So I'm definitely proud of Dustin and Cody. And I never had a chance to meet Dusty. You know, my cousin did. You know, my cousin that lives in Atlanta, D Dizzle, got to meet him back in the NWA days, the early '80s, and what have you.
Oh, nice.
The fans used to sit up front or get tickets, what have you. But Dusty was great. One of the most influential, charismatic, and probably top 3 most mock. Not I don't want to use the word mock because mock could be negative, but just impersonated voices. Now, can you do a Dusty? Can you do a Dusty?
If you will, I could do that, Dusty Rhodes. I remember one time we were playing golf, and he hit it into the sand trap. And he said, Neal, I got this rule I got to pull out. I said, what is it? He said, it's a Texas handicap rule. So he pulled out the tee for the golf tee. Supposed to be done when you start if you're not familiar with golf.
Yes.
And he snuck that underneath the ball and hit it out of the sand trap. And that was one of the most hilarious moments I've ever seen. I wish I had a cell phone back then because I'd have captured that moment. It was really funny. He hit it pretty well, too.
You do get Dusty. You do. My good friend of mine's show, we text in there, DDP, great Dusty as well.
Oh, yeah. Dusty does a great. DDP does a great Dusty for sure.
He does. Is there anyone else in wrestling? Because I know you're a fan of wrestling, not just WCW. Anybody else voice that you like to do or that you find yourself doing?
Oh, Macho Man, of course. But the best imitation, without question, is one of my favorite wrestlers is Black Machismo.
Oh yeah,
terrific on. Oh yeah, doing the different. Give me some verbiage, brother. I trust you, man. Yeah, we can make this happen. Oh yeah, you can do that. Yeah, to infinity and beyond.
Gotta do the hands, the savage hands.
Yeah.
And shout out to the good Landy Powerful too. We traveled and was around, and you don't realize how similar Angelo, Landy, and Randy sound. So you talk to Lanny regular, it sounds like Savage. Where you sometimes he would do it against Savage too, so their voices was very.
Oh yeah, he does. He does. He did a great imitation. I don't. I think I met him once, maybe, but that was it. With his passing recently, but yeah, I don't. I don't know that he sounds so much like Randy. And I remember I had been doing a program called Superstars of Wrestling. I directed that show for a little
Oh
while
wow!
in Atlanta, and it was like a marathon wrestling show. And we did all the leads that went before all the matches, like that came across the world. And we'd air these different programs of wrestling. It was like 5 hours straight. And people in Atlanta loved it for years. And I remember I had to do a video where I had to go down and videotape Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. And Macho Man was there, and I heard him talking in the hallway. And once I got to know Macho Man, I said, "Hey, I was down in Atlanta one time at the Omni back in the day, and I was doing video down there for that show that I did. And I said, I thought you were putting your voice on." I said, "Because it's a great wrestling voice." He goes, "No, it's just how I talk."
That is true. If you don't realize, Savage was actually a good pitcher. I'm a baseball fan as well. He could
Right,
have
Cincinnati Reds.
Cincinnati Reds, and I believe he had a was it an injury, his shoulder, or something that prevented him.
Yeah, I think he was so determined. I think I read one time where he actually learned how to throw it left-handed or something crazy. I mean, the
I
guy was
think
determined to make it so much, and that's what made him so wonderful as a wrestler, because he was determined to do his best and be his best every day he came out. He was always ready to go. He always had something, and he, I think he was kind of a perfectionist that really wanted to make an impact, and he did. Obviously,
he did. It's like Dusty, one people that transcended wrestling. If you're not even, you don't even have to be a wrestling fan. You know Dusty, you know Savage, and some
mm-hmm.
others, where you may not even ever watch the match, but you know their voice, you know
Mm-hmm.
their charisma, their mannerisms, just how they are, how they look.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
those tests they give kids where they say, recognize this person, who's this, who's that. Most people, oh, that's Dusty, or wait, that's Dusty with polka dots. So wait, he looks familiar, isn't he a wrestler? Same thing with Savage.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely show, especially Savage on was it Space Ghost, Coast to Coast.
Right. Yeah.
There with his voice too.
I knew the guy that actually put together that whole show,
Wow.
and phonetically, he had to take the voice of Space Ghost and work however it would sound with each voice. They had like so many cartoons they had to work off of, and that's all they had. And he had to phonetically figure out how Space Ghost would say it. You talk about
Wow.
patience, man. That's just,
Oh,
I mean, you're talking a couple frames per edit. It took a long time to edit Space Ghost.
wow. Definitely great show. Old school Cartoon Network. Old school. Well, that's
Love the voice of Space Ghost. His voice was just so unique and so cool. And I know people who had worked with Space Ghost voice said he's a really cool guy.
that is great. Shout out to Space Ghost. To the younger viewers, you don't know, Google Space Ghost, watch it. Show us on some streaming site, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. Is
It's
on
on
some.
there.
It's definitely on there.
It's classic.
If I can, you mentioned the last Nitro, and I have this on my notes. Standing next to Ric Flair, one of the greats as well.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you, being a TV producer, being what you've done at that last Nitro? You know, to paint this picture. I remember watching it with my late grandfather. He lived to be 96. He still drove World War II vet.
Wow.
Old school, got mad. And he got mad at the NWO. All those are buzzards cheating. It ain't no sport no
We're
more.
glad.
You used to get mad.
We're glad he did. That's
He
terrific.
did. And I remember distinctly sitting in his room, old school cable box with the buttons, watching the last Nitro, and of course seeing Sting and Flair Russell, and Flair's wearing the shirt. We felt like it was going to die. And for cell phones, we called it landlines. Our buddies like, no. And Shane McMahon was with that Mox turtleneck. And as you said before, Neil, with that, not WCW, but WWF even coming across TNT, and for that simulcast, when moved over, you see Vince and Shane.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, like, you just never forget it. So how was it for you last Nitro?
It was extra special for me because the strange thing is that I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio area. And that's actually where they were at on Monday Night Raw. I believe it was Monday Night Raw. Yeah, they were on our pay-per-view. What they were in Cleveland. That was really odd. Yeah, that was really weird. And just to see the guys backstage that we had heard about for so many years that were our opposition, and to see them like milling around in the back and things like that, that was very strange. And just to know that all the friends I had built relationships for many, many years would be a lot of times the last time I'd see a lot of these people. That was one of the toughest days of my life, man.
How was the background, like the camaraderie backstage? You heard a lot of people, the boys and girls, some said he felt relieved, some said he felt sad. What was the overall feeling that you remember? Were more sadness than relief? Were people, I'm sure, shocked, like, I don't know what's going to happen? As you said, we're going to see each other tomorrow. We're going to see each other in the next 10 years. Are you going to WWF? Are you going home?
Mm-hmm.
What was the general consensus backstage?
It's funny that you asked that, because we took a camera around and did a lot of backstage interviews that had never aired on that whole subject. And a lot of people were just fine with it. Like Booker T, he knew he was going to excel when he went to WWF, and we all knew that as well. Just great guy, great family. Shout out to Stevie Ray.
That's my man.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And talk to him every now and then, and really enjoy seeing that Booker's marriage is lasting really well, and the children he's raising and all that. Just good people. Anyway, he was just fine with everything, and a few people were just questioning what was going to happen. I remember Jericho, just kind of, he was okay with it, seemed to be, and not everybody was, though. They were questioning if they're going to have a job anymore. And Ric Flair was relieved for sure. He was kind of ready to be done with WCW at the time. So it was a mixed bag, but everybody that was in production, we were all really bummed, because our job that we loved so much for so long was one away.
Thank you for answering that too. Now, those interviews that you said that never aired, I'm sure they eventually became WWE property.
No, or we shot those all independently.
Oh, okay.
And it was a guy that came down and asked to be in the back with us, and I was the one that conducted most of the interviews, and that's property of his and nobody else's. So WWE, if you're willing to make an offer, sure, we're willing to put it together.
Yeah, I was going to ask, since you've been associated with books and different other things too, have you thought about maybe, since he owns it, releasing it, or doing some kind of talk about these interviews that I didn't know, and some people never knew they even aired or even existed?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about doing anything in the future with that, or you just...
Yeah, in the future, possibly. The thing about it is, we all just got busy, and we really got our careers rolling after that, and it just kind of sat on the shelf for years. It's still sitting there, and we've had a couple meetings about it as to whether we should or shouldn't. And I know a lot of effort doesn't want to be put into it unless we got a sure sale for it.
That's definitely great to know.
But it's a long series of interviews, though. I mean, obviously, being a producer, I had full access back there, and people really opened up to the camera and act as if it wasn't hardly even there. They're just talking as people talking. And normally something like that I would never release, being that I was raised by the assassin Jody Hamilton. He was my mentor, who is Nick Patrick's father. Nick Patrick, the great referee for both WCW and WWF, WWE, and NWO, of course. One of our finer moments where we wear this. Now, that was him under the ski mask.
Yes.
I bet you all know that, but it was always funny to see that. I really love that part of the character. That was hilarious.
That mug, Mr. Hughes and Nick Patrick had that mug, he used to always look that scowl on his face.
Oh, yeah. They were good at it. And then, Mr. Hughes, he was always good at that kind of mean look like that. And Nick Patrick, having his dad such a great interviewer, also, I mean, his dad's interview would just kind of make you shudder. He would look at you very directly and very matter-of-factly, the way he used to talk about Dusty and his opponents when he was the Assassin 1 and 2. He was great at it, and Nick got some of that for sure, as far as how to be able to conduct an interview and be serious looking. And sometimes the reactions of which you saw his face were just great. And I see some of his posts every now and then, and it's a lot of fun to see him now doing and revitalizing Deep South Wrestling, which is actually Deep South Championship Wrestling was the first company that I got involved with doing multi-camera directing. And Jody, his dad, gave me a chance, and we had been friends throughout his life until his death a few years back. And I cherished the moments being able to talk to him on the phone and get his knowledge about the business and how to conduct myself. And then we later, after WCW crashed, we worked together with WWE to do Deep South Wrestling again down in McDonough, Georgia, where we had a small studio down there and worked with Bill DeMont, and several other wrestlers would come down and help us with that whole deal. And we had people like The Miz and Kofi Kingston and Brian Myers and some of the people that you see on TV today. It was a great colleague. We had a bunch of really good wrestlers come through there. Mike Knox. I don't know what all their names are anymore because I just don't keep track of it. But
everybody you mentioned is the same names: Kofi, The Miz, Mike Knox, Great Khali. Definitely great.
Luke Gallows.
Luke, who still is, WWE left, and I believe he's WWE. He's back in WWE now. Was he?
I'm not sure where he's at in the Majors Brothers. So I don't know what their names are, but the one carries around a bunch of belts all the time. He's doing pretty well in an independent circle.
Yes, Myers and is it Cardona?
Yeah, Cardona. That's it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've met, being a collector as well. I got to meet them a few times at conventions. Us having mutual friends and
yeah, good people.
Great guys, just lovable, friendly.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't even
love their action figures.
Yes, they did. I have a few myself, but not like them. I mean, not like them. Now we could go back to the future, if you will. You talked about the last Nitro, and I'll ask you this and then get to your career as being a producer. The first Monday Nitro, Mall of America, 1995. Were you a part of that?
Yes.
And you talked about the last Nitro, how it was. Tell us how Neal was on the first Nitro, 1995.
We were a bit concerned. I got to say that because we were already running on a lean staff, you might say, as far as the amount of people that did what we do. And then to have another big show like that put into the mix, we were all a little bit concerned about how we're going to get it done. But it was very exciting that if something like this would take off, how that would be for our product. And to see people like Lex Luger show up, that was quite interesting. And I remember when that happened. That was pretty cool. And the Mall of America atmosphere was really good because it's something just so unusual that we had not done before. And to have like 3 stories high of people like standing around watching our product other than just being in a big arena, which is also fun. Being in huge arenas throughout the U.S. was a big joy for us too. But to see something like that was so unusual, so different. And yet the people like, say, Jeff Bornstein, the lighting person who was with AEW now still, does a great job, was always top notch as far as what he brought to the table, his lighting skills. Looked terrific. I mean, the bump shots of the crane and everything going from the top tier, just kind of working its way down to the entrance. I mean, it really looked like it was exciting, and it was. And I was proud to be a part of it.
How did you feel after the end of the first Nitro? Did you feel, okay, this is going to be a hit? A year, a little over a year later, we're going to dethrone WWF in the ratings? Or it was one of those things where, okay, it was good, we'll just have to see how it goes next week?
Yeah, I think we knew it was going to be something special. But as far as what to expect and to eventually get to the NWO. That was quite a ride that we didn't really foresee, I don't think. I mean, I knew it was going to be successful once I heard about what was going to happen with it, but it was one of those things where we just kind of had to, a lot of times, just ride it out and do our best. And that was a shout out to all the crew members that we had that worked with us. We couldn't have done it without them. Yeah, we had ideas that we had to try to get across and everything for the viewers, and really enjoyed some of the setups for some of the projects that we did, but there's no way we could have done it without the terrific crew members that were the lighting people, the audio people, the people that move stuff around backstage, the set up the drapes, to set up to the video monitors. I mean, cued people, made stuff come out of the sky, like with the different messages that fell on the NWO crowd, things like that. I mean, there's so many minor, small details that take one person doing a great job every night, consistently, day in and day out, doing whatever it takes. And that's my thing that I need to get across here, is that without our crew, we couldn't have done this.
And I'm glad you're saying it, Neal, because you're pulling back the onion of the layers of what it really takes to have a great television production of wrestling. Most people, fans that watch wrestling, they see two people in the ring, whoever it may be, then WCW, Savage, Sting, Luger, Hogan, Kevin Sullivan, Dungeon of Doom, Goldberg later, whoever it is, Dean Malenko, the Luchadors, or now WWE, you see Rollins and Reigns and The Miz or Kevin Owens, but they don't really think about the background where it takes the producer and the lights and the camera and the angles and the hard cam and the director. Everything has to work as a machine or as a big family for it to go through.
Absolutely. We had the utmost trust in each other. So if we were told to do something, or we had to tell somebody else to do something, and we'd never tell people to do stuff that we wouldn't do ourselves, we knew that it was going to get done. There's no questions asked. We didn't have to even think about as to whether they did it or not. We just knew it would happen. There was an interesting thing about wrestling in general, that production people are used to working, say, in baseball or basketball, football, hockey, whatever the major sport happens to be, and they work that season. But
Yeah.
that's some kind of weird mini bike going by. Hold on for the audio. But most people watch different sports and know that there are different seasons that they take place. Well, wrestling didn't have seasons. It was 365 nonstop. So there's a lot of people that wanted to do what we did and would jump on the train at any time. And we cherished our jobs so much. We knew everybody and their brother was out to get our position. So we made sure that they didn't.
I'm glad you did. With that, Luger coming in, big influential moment on the first Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to a year and a half later or so, Scott Hall debuts. Mike Enos is wrestling, can't remember who. Shout out to Mike Enos. Anybody wonder who the guy was in the ring? You talked about Luger debuting and you being influential as the NWO voice before we got to know the iconic voice this maybe a month or so later. Talk about the Nitro when Hall debuted. I believe it was a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, Nash debuted. And what do you remember from that? Those two Nitros.
I believe the first night that Scott Hall came out of the crowd was in Macon, Georgia, I believe. And just to see the renegade attitude that they took on right away, and to know that the timing of those two being done with WWE at the same time was remarkable. So it just so happened to hit right at the right time for both of their career and our reasoning for having them on the team. And it looked legit. And that's what we always strive for, whether it be the Steiner's car crash or the attack in the back at Disney where it looked like a riot was going on. Whatever we did that was questionable as to whether it was real or not. That was our whole point, was to try to make it look as real as possible. And hopefully a lot of people, and I've been told many times, that they believe certain things happen. But in fact, a lot of it was, and I wouldn't say this, like I said, I'm old school, but they've already told how they did everything, and I would never say anything about it. But all the, everything's out of the bag now, so we diligently planned those escapades, and for our fortunate success, they worked out, and the crowd bought it or liked it, and they kept watching.
I remember watching it in Rail. You see Razor Ramon and Scott Hall coming through the crowd and says infamously, "You know who I am, but not why I'm here."
Mm-hmm.
This was on Monday Night Raw, and I knew he was WCW prior to Diamond Stud. Some fans didn't know. Like, wait, what is Razor? And it was real. It was, oh, who's next? Nash pops up, and you didn't even see him. He just hand over. He just showed up, just like my hand. He's like, wait, Nash is saying, what's happening now? Shawn Michaels coming? Is Undertaker just it? Once again, before the internet, before the dirt sheets, you just didn't know. You're telling your friends in school and neighbors, like, oh, Razor Ramon and Diesel on WCW, and you thought it was real. You just didn't know. And then go ahead.
The way they used their phrasing and the way they conducted themselves in the interviews, you didn't know if it was a legit WWF or WWE invasion, which I thought was super clever. I mean, that's really a great way to go about it. Now, there's other things that I saw that they really screwed up on, but
You can't share. You can't share and tell us.
Well, one thing, like I remember, and I've talked about this before on my podcast, Neal Pruitt's Secrets of WCW Nitro. So if you want to hear some inside scoop of some of this information that maybe we didn't go quite in depth with, or you want to hear a little bit something different, especially about production, check out Neal Pruitt's Secrets of WCW Nitro. It's my podcast. It's on iTunes and iHeartRadio with Guy Evans, who was originally out of New York City, but originally from Wales, but a great writer of the book Nitro, The Incredible Rise and Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. And we do a podcast that talks about this pretty extensively. But I remember one thing that I was really disappointed in, because I know the power of the mask, having worked with the assassin and seen some of the things that he did and some of the tricks that they would use with swapping people in and out, and then Dusty, like being the Midnight Rider and different things like that, where they had masks. That Rick Rude came out, and I think he was just making his debut or something. And he had a mask on, and like within 30 seconds, they pulled it off. It's like, what an opportunity they could have had they put the mask on Rick Rude and kept it on him, and then milked it to where this is not Rick Rude. You guys think it's Rick Rude. It's not Rick Rude. And just keep on saying it over and over and making the fans just go ballistic, because nobody looked like Rick Rude. Nobody ever did look like Rick Rude. He was a phenomenon.
Yes, great body, just his movements.
Great worker, too. Wow. The guy really had it down.
The best backdrop bump. I say, you watch backdrops, still say Rick Rude probably the GOAT for his taking. It gets so high, he would land on his ass. He land on his back, just land on his ass sometimes. So
he was fantastic, man. What a worker.
Yes.
And yeah, he was a very peculiar person. I like to work with Rick, though.
Yeah, Rick was one of my favorites. I shout out to Manny Fernandez, one of the greats. I just we did a wrestling trivia a few weeks ago, and asked, the question was Rick Rude's finishing move, the Rude Awakening. What was it first? The net breaker? No, it was the DDT. So I remember the NWA Worldwide was the DDT first, and then we talked about how when he came to WWF, he didn't use the net breaker. He used the back breaker where he put you up. That's got the magazine. Then he went to the net breaker. So Rick Rude was great. Another one that he didn't really. He had his voice. It wasn't more so of a iconic voice, but his look and his tights. When he had the spray paint tights.
Yeah.
So you and I being artists in different way. He had people in there. Jake's wife, and he had Kamala and all the
Fifi the maid.
Fifi the maid and Snakes, and he would have the pay-per-view themes on his tights, which I thought was awesome. Definitely so.
I think that guy was in Florida that did that. I think. I'm not positive, but what terrific artwork. Yeah. I think Jimmy Hart may have had some of his stuff done too, but I'm not sure. I don't know if that person still exists, or if they passed or not. I don't know. I don't know who it was exactly. I know there's a lot of people like Tech here who knows so much stuff, and the names that he's able to just roll off the top of his head. You can tell he's a true fan, and it's great to know some of those inside stories. And I'm sure somebody out there can tell you.
And Jimmy Hart too, the great jackets and the megaphone, spray paint around then. You saw Rick Rude and Jimmy Hart. It was really it. You know, RVD and ECW, and we got more fans got to see him more in WWE and later Ryback, but around late 80s to 90s.
Ryback's another one we had at Deep South.
Oh, yes, Ryback too.
Yeah, he was there.
And the spray paint was new because you only saw Jimmy Hart and Rick Rude. That was it. Nobody else had that spray paint, graffiti, artist type gear.
Cool look.
But them two, it was. And it looked different. You know, Rick Rude's tights were different. Even Jimmy Hart's was a different style. Hulkamaniacs and the Mega Powers when he was a heel.
I wonder how much money each one of them cost. It surely had to be a fortune. You know, like Flair's robes. Not that Flair was the first one to wear one, but
oh man,
I mean, you know, the thousands of dollars and hours that they had to put into that time to actually make those is just, man.
Savage, like you said, Randy Savage, his attire. Other people just definitely like you got to invest in yourself, which is important.
Yeah,
definitely invest in yourself.
Randy was all about him as a product, and that's what I could advise anybody that's trying to get into wrestling or do wrestling or even do a business. Is you have to make yourself in a certain way unique and use your strengths as far as your personality and the way you treat and react to people, and amplify it to a certain degree. And don't be afraid of being different, because different people look at that and go, that's unusual, and it gets their attention. And that was part of what our business was, is doing certain things to get attention and get noticed, and then ride that out and see where it went.
It's true. You hear from the man himself, Neal Pruitt, telling you be different. If you like everything else, it's nothing special. Do it different. Those that eat Burger King, we all know what Burger King does on purpose. You get fries, and then it's the one onion ring. What stands out? The fries and the onion ring. The onion ring, because there's one, and you got about 20 fries, and their fries aren't the best. You just got to stand out the black jelly bean or the black licorice or that one mystery color candies back there. Like, wait, you got to stand out in the world. You can't do everything like everyone. Some of the great people may have been a little off, but that's what set them apart. Or rather be they thought different, they moved different. That's just how it is. So we went from the last Nitro back in time to the first. Luger's debut, Scott Hall's debut, Nash. Bash at the Beach, Hogan, 96, the music and what have you. When pay-per-views had their own themes. We're not talking about rock bands, you know, where you paid money, thousands of dollars to Metallica or Saliva. Or remember back in the day was what was that group that Spider-Man song, everybody sung? So the rock bands where you pay now. Pay-per-views had the instrumental themes. And that was the NWO's theme before you came aboard, and the classic, as Bischoff and Ash said, the porno type music and your voice. Hogan turning heel. I got the word because back then you could listen to pay-per-views on the radio. You could watch it on TV, but listen to it. So my late mother called me, come home from school. Hey, guess what? Hulk Hogan's a bad guy. No, he's not. He did. My friend told I did not believe her. Lo and behold, that Nitro, watch it. The stills, you didn't. Hogan dropping the lead.
Yeah, we used to replay some of the pay-per-view on Monday Nitro with stills.
Yes, it was. It was the atmosphere. You being a producer, Hogan turning heel. No one saw it coming. And I got to defend this, and I'm sure you can, because the greatest manager of all time, Bobby Heenan, people then blasted him. Well, he gave away the ending. No, he didn't. Heenan had to say whose side is he on, because historically, Heenan never was a fan of Hogan.
Correct.
By character, WWF, he hated Hogan. Flair came in. It was, it's not fair to be Flair. Heenan never liked Hogan. So for Heenan to say what side is he on, made sense for Heenan's character because he always was against Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he said it, we didn't know. So when he dropped that leg, you're there. I saw the tape, and my buddy that lives in California now still has it. I don't know if it still works. I saw that fan that jumped in that they edited out that fan that ran upset.
Mm-hmm.
What was it
Yeah.
like, the atmosphere of Hogan turning heel being there? And then tell us when you became infamous and iconic of being the voice of the NWO.
The time that Hogan turned, I believe, is Daytona Beach. Was that right?
Yeah, Best in the
Oh,
Beach, 96.
Yeah. I think it's Daytona Beach.
I think so.
I remember because a lot of times I'd be in and out of the truck for a while there. I was at ringside with Dusty and with Tony Schiavone and with uh, Jesse Ventura and Jim Ross. I was at ringside, and then eventually I worked my way into the truck and kind of assistant directed a little bit with some of the entrances and things like that for the pay-per-view stuff, because I did a lot of the graphics with some of the great editors that we had, and then Rick Morganelli, who was infamous for all the looks for like Bash at the Beach and Halloween Havoc, and just a fantastic designer for set design. And I remember I was talking to Craig Leathers, who directed and was executive producer for a lot of the success of
Shows us.
NWO and WCW, and directed a lot of the pay-per-view events, and then eventually Clash of the Champions after Dan Bynum, another great director, left us and moved on in '96, I believe. But he said, "You're going to want to stay for this segment." And I was in the truck right behind Craig when they were calling those shots of what was happening in the ring, and the pandemonium of the crowd and the roar and the disgust of people and the raw emotions that came out of people that probably didn't even know they had emotions was just jubilation for the truck to see that. It was that cool, and it was that exciting. It was that fun to watch something so historic.
Yeah, it was great. It was. And
It was.
the classic line, and you see where you being a television producer, you can understand this of how the world changed. We're here in 2023. Back then, this was 1996. People, if you go back and watch the Nitro after, Tony Schiavone issued a apology to the fans in character because he said a word, three-letter word. Now, broadcasting, we know the 7 words that the 7 deadly words we can't say. Now it's 8. We know what the 8 is. We're not going to say it. But now on TV, you watch, they can say shit, damn, and bitch, and fuck, and ass, and it's no big deal. You watch a movie, it's like 89 fucks, and you get, and he said hell.
Mm-hmm.
The infamous Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell.
Yeah, I remember that.
At the time, as a producer, like, what was that scripted? How was it backstage? Was Tony legit? I'm sure he wasn't in trouble, but was it a surprise for you guys that he said hell? Because it shows saying this hell back then was like 10 years ago saying the word fuck. And so,
Tony was so good.
yes.
He and Jim Ross, especially, they were just so terrific at describing what they saw as a fan. And I don't think you can be that good and not be a fan first.
Yes.
And they just kind of would let themselves get emotionally involved to a certain degree, I think. And that's what we want to try to get out of the crowd and the fans is emotions. That was our job. Our job was to try to get people. I don't know what's going on in the background. Sounds like a raceway or something like that.
We're live, right?
Somebody's in the cage or something. Yeah.
We're live, right?
Yeah. But I don't know who's going up with that little motorbike down the road. But anyway, I don't think you can be that good at calling matches and things like that without first being a fan and appreciating every move that's made in the ring and how they put on their performance, because those guys, they put their heart into it, and it shows, and it came across on camera as sincere. And that's one thing that, again, going back to Nick Patrick's dad, the assassin, Jody Hamilton, as far as interviews and things like that go, you have to have an element of sincerity in there. And that's most crucial to bring your message across, because people know when they're being totally hyped. They really do. You have to, I think, in my opinion, show something that, you are sincere about. And you got to kind of, I think, work yourself up and work yourself into talking like that. But those guys, they brought it all, and they didn't leave anything out. They were all about telling how they felt right on camera without any hesitation, and that's why it worked.
It didn't. I think it back to that Shivani sincere.
Mm-hmm.
He really didn't get rattled too much. Kind of like Dave Crockett and NWA. Dave was always, Tony was a good commentator then, but nobody could have been the most face commentator except for Dave Crockett. He didn't really get too rattled, but when he did, it meant a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You think of the Horseman days, Tully and Magnum, or different things like that, where Dave would get a little upset, or you would hear the emotion, it was real. Tony didn't really get too upset. Heenan would. And I just thought about it, the greatness of Dusty. That match, Dusty was, Dusty had his Dustyisms and Bulla and if you will.
Bull of the Woods.
Yeah, Bull of the Woods and the Froggy Splash and Who Be Bad Now.
From the loins of a plumber.
Yeah, right. Son of a plumber. And he didn't say anything. When Hogan turned, he was quiet. I think the only thing I remember Dusty saying, "You just sold your soul to the devil."
Mm-hmm.
He said nothing. Just quiet. And that's the great emotion of Dusty being so energetic and using his own words. I guarantee you, always say, I guarantee you, said very little. Shivani was mad, which was out of character. And Heenan he was shocked. He was like, I've been telling you guys all these years. And he was like, look at it. They got tears in the eyes. This is great. What was the background like after Bash at the Beach 96? Cameras go off, trash in the ring. The fan ran in. He got kicked in his head. What was the backstage like?
Oh, man. I don't know that we could have been any happier, honestly. The way it worked out and the way we knew the trajectory was just starting to take off. It was amazing. It was awesome. It was as good as it could be. That you knew you struck a nerve. And that was the funny part about the business, is striking people's nerves and trying to figure out what makes them tick or what makes them think about something, and how can you twist that a little bit to keep them entertained.
Sure. Now, after all of this, you already backstage television producer, doing so much, trained by the great Jody Hamilton, rest in peace. Name on the credits. No one knows how you look but your family and the wrestlers. Fans don't know who you are. The NWO music comes on, and we hear a voice, New World Order, and you hear biggest icon in wrestling, and We Are in Control was Bischoff. That was his clip. Mm-hmm. How did you get approached to do the NWO voice, and let us know what were your preparation for the voice? Did you get any type of advice for someone? Did you use any other voice actors and any other people, any things as like a way to prepare for your voice? How did it come about?
It's pretty simple, really. One suggestion I remember talking with Kevin Sullivan was there, and Craig Leathers, Keith Mitchell. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else there. Not that I remember. I don't think Eric was there, but we were trying to figure out how to portray the whole, it being a different company, being a different entity of wrestling, nothing to do with WCW. And I said, I really can't wait to get this thing started. I said, but to make it seem legit, we can't really have anybody that we've ever heard before in the wrestling business, unless we made a big deal as them turning heel or just getting discussed with WCW on the air, and it would have kind of taken too long to even bring that to a boil, and I don't think that was the best way to go about it. And I said, but there is a person that I really like their voice and think it's very unusual, and I think we could get some mileage out of it. There was a guy that was on 99X here in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Kevin Eubanks. He's since passed away, unfortunately.
Oh,
had a great voice, I thought, and it's very unusual. And Craig, I think, said, well, what does he sound like? And I did a pretty good spot on imitation of him, which is 99X. And they go, why don't you do it? And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense. What the heck? And it was kind of a relief because we did so many things at the last second or at the spur of the moment. And obviously me being in the wrestling business for a while, having known how to help characters develop, it really helped to have my voice available to me at any time to do anything. So, you know, it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, who knows? But I was always able to grab a microphone and just make it happen. And then put my own twist on things was fun. And also the twist on, say, the messages that came out of the sky that you saw millions of papers falling.
so now, yeah.
We did those also, Kemper Rogers and I, and that was cool to see every time it happened. And it was neat to hear my voice, for sure. It was a big honor.
Now, with the NWO ads, follow announcements paid for by the New World Order, do you have any favorite ads? Did you watch all of them? I believe someone on YouTube or Daily Motion, I think at one point, put all of them up. I don't think it was maybe 57 or some.
Oh, wow.
Oh, this a few years ago. I don't know. Someone either they put it up or might be down, I think, on a Reddit or some kind of forum. It was like 50 something, or it was around 40 or 50. I had no idea.
Wow, me neither. I wouldn't even know that.
Right.
I'd like to hear it though.
Now, do you have any favorite ads? Did you watch any of them when you did it, or did you just do the pre-recorded voice and that was it?
What was really cool is when I first did the voice. Are you still seeing me?
Yes, I see you.
Okay, because my camera went out on this end. Sorry
And
about
you're
that.
still clear.
So what was really interesting was when I first did the voice, I got to do the voice in a Disney studio at Disney MGM because that's where we were at during the Olympics in '96 in Atlanta. They thought that we couldn't get our shows done. So they thought that the traffic would be so bad here because it's normally pretty bad anyway, that we couldn't make it to downtown to get our shows done at CNN Center because we were right amongst all of the Olympic activities.
Mm-hmm.
So they shipped us down to Orlando and Disney MGM, and to go in front of that microphone that maybe somebody like Robin Williams would have stood in front of was a true honor. Wow. To go into that audio booth and then to have such a terrific microphone like a Neumann or something, a really super expensive microphone, and to be able to just do the slightest whisper and hear yourself cleanly and try different little versions of what you said was really, really cool for me as being a producer in general and having loved television all my life. I got into TV because my father was an electrician and TV repairman on the side and had his own business at one point. So as a kid, I got to see and look inside the box of what a TV was back in the day. They didn't have just thin TVs, they were a big box. And to see those wires and cables and lights and different tubes make our image projected across the world was just fascinating to me. Wow. So electricity is magical to me. So to be at a place like that in my life where it was so exciting was just a terrific thing to be involved with and a whole lot of fun.
Wow. that is awesome. You see how the foreshadowing of you being mini Neal and you seeing your dad and TV and how it works, and the old school ones, way before flat screens and what have you, and plasma 4K and 5K.
Yeah, my grandfather built his own television back in the 70s.
Wow.
Amazing.
Do you have a picture of it? Do you still have a picture of the TV, or?
I don't, not that I know of, but my grandpa was a super perfectionist, and that crept into my life, and hopefully he saw it on the air. And someone had once said that I should make a episode of Star Trek, not Star Wars, when I do a lot of the videos I did. But I think it helped to solidify that we were doing our best at what we did to entertain people.
That's great, and realizing that television is generational now. Your grandfather built his first TV, being a perfectionist. Your dad, worked on TV as a repairman. You, third generation, got to see what it was like inside, and you in TV as a producer and do the inner workings.
Mm-hmm.
So TV is a generational part of your life, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Like a basically like a lineage. Now your son, as you mentioned, is he into TV at all? Like you, is he into it at all? Acting, repair, producing, or?
He's into fixing electronic instruments and things like that, and
Still okay.
He's got a really good mind for the audio business in general. He was in School of Rock all throughout his grade school and high school career. Really knows how to wire up the whole system. He could definitely be a great TV producer if that's what he wanted to do. He been exposed to it as much as possible when I was doing what I do, and I have a great picture that I published before and somewhere out there where he's actually being held by Ming when we were in Orlando, and my son was just less than a year old, and he's grabbing Ming's nose like that. It's really one of my most favorite pictures.
Wow, and Ming, they say the toughest all the time as far as wrestling.
Right. Yeah.
Bob too. Bob's a good guy. Definitely good guy. I never met Ming. I talked to Barb, and
great guy.
Funny story with Barb.
Ming's got a great family also, and just
yes,
all the people involved in his life are just wonderful people, and boy,
so
couldn't ask for a nicer guy.
They can easily kill you or hurt you, and it is so nice. And speaking of talking, something he had told me was talking, and at a show afterwards, backstage, you eat, drink, what have you. And he came up to me and asked me how I was doing, and he heard my mom had passed and different things, and we would talk. He said he had the voice. He said, "Brother, Bob, no talk. Me, never interview, never." He said, "Think, never." I said, "Wow, he's never done an interview. You've never heard him talk." We heard him in the ring, but I said, "Wow." And he was joking around and picking around. And Kevin Sullivan was there, and Kevin never lost for words.
Oh man, Kevin's great.
Slow Kevin, but we
had a really good talk last time I saw him. We really did have a great talk. It was so terrific to meet up with Kevin again. I tell you, he's so innovative and so instrumental in a lot of things that went down that people wouldn't even know about. He's just a brilliant mind in the wrestling business.
I love Kevin, man. I haven't talked to him in a while. We keep in touch here and there, brother. And he just, with the way he talked, he would had a little snicker. He just loves sports. I'm a baseball fan, Red Sox fan, Orioles. We would talk about so much, just not even wrestling, just life. And I remember, I think it was maybe my cousin or someone from my old church. Christmas got me one of those DVDs. I don't know, it's from the dollar store, and it said Florida Championship Wrestling. One of those and it was Kevin Sullivan. I don't know if you remember this. He was sitting at his place in Florida on a lawn chair talking about Florida Championship Wrestling and Eddie Graham, and it was shown older. And this wasn't a WWE production. It was when DVDs first came out. They had like the real skinny, like the real skinny, like 8.5 by 11 thin covers. And it was like, and got it from the dollar store. And Kevin Sullivan, it was a series, and I think it even aired on one of those public access cable television, one of those cable channels that played like stuff after midnight. See Kevin Sullivan, or I think it was Florida, and I think something with Memphis. he wasn't on it with someone else. I don't know if you ever seen those, but
Mm-mm.
if I could find it, I'll send you a picture
Okay.
of the DVD. But definitely just to see him talk about Florida as a kid, you know, we didn't know. We just know Captain the Taskmaster, the Games Master. We didn't know
Mhm.
he was in Florida. He did so much stuff before we saw him on TV.
Oh yeah,
So,
I
uh,
love his Boston accent still.
yes, we joke with accents. I'm Baltimore. I have a strong Baltimore accent. He's Boston.
Hmm.
Russo, New York. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's their own accents.
Can't get rid of it.
No, you don't really have an accent at all.
I'm glad you said that
You don't.
because I'm from the Midwest and I sound like people hopefully on the radio or on television. And a lot of people that grew up in the Midwest are on TV as far as the host or the interviewer and things like that. And we had a really great radio program at college, and people tried to, if they had an accent, they tried to get rid of it. So I'm glad you said that.
you can't you can't get rid of it. You don't hear it yourself. You don't. So you go
Mhm.
back and listen to your voice, which is
It's
hard.
tough to get used to your own voice. It really is. It took me a long time.
It was cringe for me, is doing radio and podcasting, and when you go back and listen, you write notes. Yeah, that's how I sound. It's like
Yeah,
you
I finally got used to it. It took me years.
they'll definitely sell. Now you've been a television producer for years, being amazing at it.
Oh, thank you.
Doing how was the crossover to you going for television producer to you doing radio? Using and you have a voice, iconic voice, but as you know, doing a radio show or podcasting or both, it's totally different. Know how to talk, knowing your voice, how to
Hmm.
say things, your cadence, writing up TV formats, for different segments, segues, intros, outros, commercial ads. Was that a challenge for you when you crossed over?
No doubt to get your best out of talent that you work with, which I think I was pretty good at helping people develop their character, how they should sincerely present themselves in front of the camera. It takes a little bit of introspective as far as who you think you are. And I think the reason why I was able to deliver a pretty good message to help people out was because I myself have issues about me that I'm not all that comfortable with. And to actually have to boil all those things down into now I have to act that way after telling people for so many years how to do it and only doing it minimally. I thought I could always, but you don't really know until you do it on the regular. And I really did have to practice and listen to myself and get over the fact that you can have silence and you don't have to say and you can not double clutch and everything that I told people to try to avoid. I had to boil that all down into who I was on the air. And luckily I had done radio in college. My first radio project was I knew what I wanted to do in 10th grade. I wanted to be a TV producer, so that helped a bunch. So when I went to college, I immediately got on WBG radio at Bowling Green State University. And my first, um, I guess, project was working on Tuesday and Thursday from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Again, I said 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. And people would look at that and go, man, that's just torturous to do it at that time. And to a certain degree, yeah, you're right. But you know what it was? It was the opportunity for me to be educated at the end of that shift at 7 a.m. when the real people who were really good at it came in. And they didn't mind me hanging around watching how they did it and observing what made them successful. And I advise anybody getting into whatever business you're doing to go with an expert and work with them a while. People that just jump into a business without having any kind of knowledge of how that business works are foolish, in my opinion,
Yes.
because you can get so educated by the first year you do anything. And when you work with somebody who's really good at it, if you pay attention and ask the right questions and sincerely ask what makes them good at it, they'll tell you. Because, like sitting here right now, I don't mind doing this because hopefully somebody will get something out of it.
Right.
And somebody be educated on hearing something they hadn't heard before. Maybe you're trying to start a business, whatever. Now you may have a little more knowledge on how to go about presenting yourself. And it was weird for me when I did the podcast to take all that information and make it so, and try to develop my on camera persona, I guess you might say, and try to be as authentic as I could.
Yes.
But I've gotten a lot better over the years because of having done it many times over. And that's what it's all about. It's about reputation and doing it over and over and developing your message. And it's been a journey for sure.
And honestly, I've listened to you since we've been in contact, and you called me that night, and I did my course of research, thorough research, and listened to your shows, and I enjoyed them. You can see I enjoy it, and how you speak and how you convey your thoughts and your feelings and just your tone of voice, because people realize you're just doing radio. Now people, as they can see us, but there's some that can't, so they only go by your voice. So they can't see your body language and your facials.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they go by your voice tone, and your inflection, and how you say things, and high pitch and low pitch. And if you
I could work on that a little more probably. If I were to really want to do it for a living on a regular basis, I would definitely amp that up a little bit probably. And I normally talk a lot with my hands, but in a kind of a restricted box, it really not as easy because it doesn't come as naturally. On a wider shot, I normally do talk a lot with my hands, just for emphasis. And I kind of subconsciously do it, and it's happening below the screen
That's it.
where you're not seeing now.
Yes,
But it's just the way it is,
it's
and
fine.
just being natural, I think, as natural as you can and as honest as you can about what it is. I sometimes still have issues on how I look and present myself on camera that I wish I would have done this or that, but you never get good at it until you try it over and over.
That's how you grow, and you have even the NWO voice, and your regular voice is still good. It's a even kill. Some people they talk high too much and then low, and they go high, low, high, and it's not a consistency. That's something that you do have even now. And listen to your shows, I definitely enjoy it. There's people that
Thanks.
are on TV that I know, or people that's on radio or podcasting, which can be interchangeably. Broadcasting isn't podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always taught of broadcasters can podcast. Podcasters can't necessarily broadcast. I'm sure you understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Any broadcaster being trained in TV, or myself in radio, or going through sitting in the studio, the red light, and reading this, and okay, we got here and a commercial here, and looking at the timer. That's how it was. I'm sure even with TV, more rigorous, and got the director back here. Like mic check. It's like I can't, different things where you sit at, how you look, the power chair, like, oh, I sit here, you got to sit there. That's how we were trained, and you still grow. You and I talked before we recorded. You were saying some things. I was like, brother, you're right. Thanks for that. You grow. You see things as well. So it's good that you being who you are, and you still like, hey, I gotta work on stuff. I gotta work on this and that.
I still do.
I have to work on stuff.
I still do every day.
Yes.
But it's a fun business to do. It's just changed so much and so drastically that it's so cool, though, to know that anybody who wants to do it has their own channel. That's amazing. I mean, there's no other time in history that you could say that. And if you have something to say, start on YouTube and do your stuff, and iTunes and wherever else, and get your message out there. It's amazing that you could even do that. It really is. I mean, compared to when I'm sitting at home. When I was sitting at home in Cleveland, Ohio. It's funny because not long ago I was approached by a gentleman named Terry who went to my high school. Didn't know him, but he had been watching WWE, one of the network shows, and what came on was these two guys that were wrestling against the NWO when they used to have the matches in a empty arena, and Nick Patrick underneath the mask was the referee.
Saturday night.
Yeah, he heard that the two wrestlers were from Leavittsburg, Ohio, and said, "There's got to be a connection." So sure enough, he tracked me down, and then subsequently it ended up being a article that they had in the newspaper talking to Andy, who was the entertainment editor for the Warren Tribune, and that was really fun to know that somebody listened out there and heard that town and said, there's a connection, and tracked me down. It was really a lot of fun. I got to visit with them recently when I visited my mom and brother and family in Northeast Ohio. So it's pretty cool to talk to them.
That's great. That's amazing. I remember those NWO Saturday nights, and they beat up two guys real quick, and six. Park would have the really. What shout out to one of my staff members, Tove, said it's like, hey, he was doing vlogs back then. Remember, Six had the camera. You could do like the point of view, and that wasn't done back then. Now, doing it, great stuff. The ski mask, Nick Patrick playing around. That's not Nick Patrick. We know it was him, but you just play around with that. Speaking of iconic voices, you got to work in WCW around the time of the great late Lee Marshall, Stagger Lee, who some people may not know was the infamous
"They're great"
iconic voice of Tony the Tiger. Any memories of him?
Lee had that voice, and it was a great voice. And Lee could do that voice real well. I just remember having not a so easy time to getting him to go certain directions with his voice. Some people get locked into what they came to the dance with, and some people, like voiceover people, can really mock you well, and that's what we want. And not everybody wants to do it or did that. And I just remember working with the guy that did the monster truck voices, and he didn't really want to do what I asked him, or wasn't able to for whatever reason. So
The Sunday guy.
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on your style. And I think subtleties with your voice, especially when you're knowing what you're going to say, is ultra crucial on how you do it. Now, on the other hand, John Wayard, who was the voice of the WCW, he was absolutely fantastic at the slightest inflection to make it work. And he was so good at it that after a few times working with him, he knew what we were looking for. And the emphasis was on the right syllable. And he was able to really bring it home and get involved with the voice and how to present our product. And to this day, I still talk to John and really enjoy swapping stories with him and just being with him and reliving some of our memories and also just talking to him in general. Great guy.
That is great. And shout out to him. I definitely never knew. And most people thought of the WCW voice guy, WCW magazine, or the voiceovers of the pay-per-view, or have it. It's definitely great.
He did a lot of country music. He was the voice announcer for the Country Music Awards for many years. Terrific guy. Great voice.
You know what? Now that you say it, it clicks. So I still watch the Country Music Awards or just different things on TV, and now that you said, thinking back, like with Lee Marshall, Tony the Tiger. Oh wait, that makes sense. And now you said the WCW voice.
Yeah, it's weird when you hear people's voices and immediately brings you back to a certain time or place. I remember when I was in Savannah, Georgia. In Savannah, Georgia, they have one of the biggest St. Patrick's Day celebrations in the U.S. A huge parade. It's just crazy down there. and yeah, everything's green. So I was down there and just kind of hanging out on River Street, it's called, where they had like a lot of cobblestones and stones on the streets that were actually from England, because they'd bring them over there as ballast to weigh down the ships, and then they'd take them off the ship and make roads out of them. Anyway, we're down there, and all of a sudden I hear a voice, and like, wow, that's weird. That's some lady who was the newscaster for radio when I was in college. And I turned around and said, Kat, what are you doing here?
Wow.
And yeah, so blast from my past, her husband was in the Savannah Ballet down there. And like you said, when you hear certain voices, you know it brings you back to a time and place. And instantly I knew exactly who it was that was behind me talking. It's really odd.
That's amazing. You definitely are right. Now you mentioned that, Neal, about hearing a voice and it just triggers your brain, takes you back to a specific time. You was a kid eating cereal or eating grilled cheese or out on a date. With saying that, I'm gonna name some names. Tell me very quickly where your mind goes to. It could be an event or a situation. I'm gonna tell you. Tony Schiavone.
Tony Schiavone, his honesty, his ability to put his lens the way a fan would think, his ability to work so hard as he did as a executive producer when I was producing WCW Saturday Night, or in general having to call him on Friday, Fix It Friday we called it. Kemper Rogers and I would fix all the different shows and keep track of everything. The guy was brilliant. He's just a super smart guy, and really fun to be around. Sure. And one day he got pantsed in the lobby.
Oh,
he wouldn't mind me saying this. Where the heck were we? I think we're in Biloxi, Mississippi. I don't know why I remember that. I think so. And Tony had worn some like gym shorts or something that really didn't cinch up with a belt. I remember Rob Wright, who eventually went on to, he was a senior editor for us for WCW and worked on Nitro a little bit at the beginning, and eventually went on to doing graphics for what's his name? Went on Larry King Live.
Okay.
For whatever reason, he had worked with WWE, WWF, with Craig Leathers before, and he just had this idea. Don't ask me why. He went right behind Tony and just grabbed the sides of his shorts and yanked him to the floor.
Tony.
And Tony being Tony, did not sell it one iota, did not even flinch, just picked his pants up and brought it back up.
Don't sell it.
He did tell us, so he was thinking about not wearing underwear that day. I thought that was funny.
Oh, man. I'm glad
that was funny.
Lady changed his mind, because there was a whole... He definitely would have driven a whole new production right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was funny. Tony's a great guy.
Gotta give a shout out to this guy, his voice. Iron Mike Tenay. Professor Mike Tenay. Mm-hmm. Underrated. Great. I think he added so much to the commentary. WCW, later on in TNA, Impact. When you hear his voice, what first thing comes to your mind?
He was worked into the system, having been on the fringes of the system as far as his writing goes and things like that. And, you know, the kayfabe and kind of the era of, do you keep it a secret? Don't you? Whatever. So I think Mike probably didn't have the easiest of beginnings, but his knowledge and perception of what the fans saw and how he felt about the product really, I think, brought new insight to the business. It really was perspective maybe that hadn't been seen before.
Yes.
And I remember how much Mike was into the product. And one of the special times I can tell you about is we went to Mexico City to do a series of videos on masks. Rey Mysterio was one of the reasons we went down there, and we talked to Rey Mendoza, famous Mexican wrestler, and got to just see where El Santo's grave was. El Santo was one of the first to ever wear a mask. He wore a silver mask.
Legend, yes.
And meet Hijo del Santo and his son, and Negro Casas, and several people, Apollo Dantes, the Shocker. We met some really fun people down there, and to see the respect that Mike Tenay had brought to the product, having known so many things about the luchadores and Mexican wrestling, was a different perspective that we hadn't seen before, nor really even knew a whole lot about. And to know how happy he was during that time that we did those, and when he interviewed the gentleman that actually built wrestling masks, that's one of my favorite times, I guess, of doing production, was with Mike Tenay in Mexico, and with Bill Tinsley at the camera. And I know Jason Douglas, who is a great producer with WCW. He was there with us, and I think Mike Filosa, a terrific audio person who does a lot of films and TV series today, he was with us, and it was just a great trip, and all-around trip, and we had a whole lot of fun. And I think we got some information that we'd have never gotten had he not studied and been aware of the product in Mexico for so long. It brought a new perspective.
That's amazing.
I miss talking to Mike. I wish I could again. He's kind of dropped out of the whole scene, and I'm sad because of that.
Yeah,
he was a great friend of Bobby Heenan's.
Yeah, it was and you already answered my next question about favorite moments in production. I do remember that the little vignettes you guys would do for Nitro, talking about the history of Luchador with Rey Mysterio and Gail Juventud and different ones that was new, and I seeing the different footage was actually amazing. That adds the education, and definitely we miss Mike Tenay, not because he's still alive, but he's not in the business anymore. And I'll say the last I've seen of him is another great voice, Don West. I was in talks with him to do our show when we agreed, and this unfortunately was maybe because he lived in Alaska, and this unfortunately was about a month before he found out about him having cancer, the lymphoma.
Sad situation.
And rest in peace to the great Don West, great voice.
Yeah,
on the
I love the business.
He did.
He worked hard. He was unique. He put his heart into it.
He did. And the last I got, a friend of mine sent me a tweet of Mike Tenay. I think he tweeted out on some platform of sending his love and wishes to Don West. And that's the last we've heard from him. So, but Mike Tenay was great and grew, as we talked about, continuously growing and learning. And
what a run!
Yes,
he did a terrific job at TNA, and wow, he really made an impact for sure. And I was so glad to know him really that closely. It was
great.
It's weird how people come in and out of your lives and make an impact. And I suggest you all try to do a positive thing for somebody every day if you can.
Of course, keep giving. You never know when they're gonna be here today, gone tomorrow. I know it's a cliche, but it's true.
That's true.
So it's just the late great Jim
Brown.
Love
somebody.
love him, hug him, tell him you love him. I always taught you don't go to bed angry. Anybody listening that's married in a relationship, brother, sister, just try not to. You still can have the emotions. Tell them you love them because you may not wake up. As we mentioned, the great late Jim Brown just passed away.
Cleveland Brown, I remember as a kid, hearing his legendary performance, one of the greatest running backs ever for Cleveland Browns, especially. And I grew up watching the Cleveland Browns, of course.
It's just sad, and I gotta give a shout out to my personal friend, Big Bill Anderson. Not sure if you know who that is. In the business, he's done some work all around WWF, WCW. Real close friends with superstar Billy Graham, who sadly just passed on. And,
I may know him.
Big Bill, Caucasian guy, black hair.
I may know him.
Done a lot.
It doesn't come to mind right off the bat, but
Yeah,
I may have come across him at one time or another.
I'll text you a picture of him. And ironically, speaking of those who come and go, I have a book. Bill wrote a book. Bill Anderson, and I just realized last month, opening up the book, never knew Superstar Billy Graham autographed it. He got Superstar
Neat.
Billy Graham to autograph for me because a fan of his, and Bill's a great guy. Shout out to you, Bill, and he would keep me in touch with how Superstar Self was, and
Mm-hmm.
send my condolences, and he, texted me back, said, was hanging in there. So just love you much, man. But the whole thing to say, like Bill said, with Superstar, with anyone, like you said, tell somebody you love them, be a blessing to somebody. As you say, doing this show,
Mm-hmm.
being a blessing to my show, doing your show, everything that you put up on social media, you never know what it could take to save someone's life. A thank you, a hug.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, do you need $1? Hey, man, I'll pay for your stuff at the grocery store. You just getting the Coke, or you just getting some peanuts, or just letting somebody, you driving, hey, you go in the front. Smallest things. You just,
Yeah, there's a lot of lonely people out there that need help.
it is.
It only takes a second. It doesn't take that big an effort a lot of times to make somebody's day for sure. With just a smile, holding the door open for them, acknowledging their existence. They may not have had that all week long or all year long. And if you can do something positive for somebody, go ahead and go for it, because you never know the impact you can make for generations, possibly.
Exactly. And you're
It's pretty
right.
cool.
It's something I had to always remember in working at colleges and working with people and communications and doing different tours and information sessions. And I was always taught of, you never know what that person had to go through before they got to you,
Mm-hmm.
before they
That's
got to
right.
work or church or to the store. So the smallest thing could, boom, set them off,
Mm-hmm.
and they go haywire. Or the smallest thing, to our point, could calm them down. Just a hug or a
Yeah,
gesture
make their day.
could make their
Bring
day.
them up a little bit.
That's
And there's no way. One thing I learned in being in the men's group I was in, that you never know what impact you can make on somebody, nor is it your job to measure it. But
oh,
it's surprising down the road. Sometimes you hear things that people appreciate later, and they come up to you and say, "Hey, man, I remember that day when you did this or did that, and wow, what a rush of feeling good that does for you, and that it's impossible to bring somebody else up without bringing yourself up at the same time. It's a good feeling. Try
yeah.
it often."
And to look out for people and not talk about it, not boast or put it out there. Just do your good work, and you don't got to say, hey, you know what I did today? I fed the homeless. I did this. They know, and that's it.
Yep,
You know,
God knows. Most
God definitely
importantly.
knows. Before we let you go, and I thank you so much for your time so far
Yeah, take it was fun, man.
on a beautiful day in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you, since you being a television producer, certain shots, iconic shots in wrestling. With that, you see iconic fans. So I want to ask you this, and this is a question from my staff. We call her Nana WCW. It was an older white lady with white bushy hair that you see that used to swing at Hogan. Hogan used to pick with. Do you know who she was? Did Hogan know her? One of the iconic fans. She just was an older grandmother, and you would see her a couple of times at the Nitros. Picking picking with Hogan. Were you familiar with her at all, or did you even know her?
No, not familiar with them, but we had some real unusual people at center stage when we used to do the WCW Nitro tapings every other week. That's about all I can say with that. But they were known. The I think they called the one trio the prom queens. They'd wear like these sequins dresses,
Oh,
stuff like
they used to
that.
sit up front.
Yeah,
Yes, I that's what was.
and I remember this dude. Anytime we went to East Rutherford, New Jersey, or anywhere in New York City, he was there, front row, center. He's an iconic fan. I remember him, and I thought it was interesting what Jericho did And Jericho, I get a shout out to him because he was very kind to me when I was visiting AEW in Nashville, and he introduced me to Tony Khan. That was really cool of him to do that. But I remember him having Ralphus with him, and Ralphus, I know he had a great time doing that. He was typical fan-looking guy. I don't know if you remember Ralphus.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just funny the people that go in and out of the ring that you would never expect, like say Woody Kearse, who helped us a lot when we were at Disney MGM and getting the talent to be in the right place at the right time. And we had entrances and things like that. They were coming from different buildings, and the iconic shows we did at Disney MGM in the streets of Disney down there. That was yet another unusual look that I think brought something different to the fans. Just see them walk through those places that look like movie sets was really cool.
Now, are you the reason, Neal, for the spinning ring? Talk about that. WCW Worldwide, the ring that used to spin. Were you the reason?
No, but I like that. Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, I do. Yeah, it was kind of a pain to a certain degree, but I thought it was really cool. Yeah, I know the audio people had a little bit of angst for that thing because they had to unplug all their microphones before they spun the ring, and then they had to plug them back in again and make sure they worked. So that wasn't all that easy. But yeah, some of the innovation of wrestling in general over the years of production, to be here to really pay close attention to television. Wrestling was on the cutting edge of technology. Oftentimes, it's just the way it was with pay-per-view events and the ability to bring something new to the viewers. Like, say, for instance, one of the few things that was good about the NWO Sold Out show was the referee cam and the camera on a stick. I thought that was a really cool added feature that I hadn't seen before. And it was so fun to do the various entrances of the opposing team to make up those different sayings that were announced over the speakers when they were walking down to the ring. That was a blast.
It was some guy that was pretty great that kept saying different things, the Mexican jumping bean or the loser the low. And I added it. You didn't see that the ref cam and the way the angles were. It wasn't just straight. It was kind of like a diagonal.
You're right. Yeah, because they didn't really know how it looked because they couldn't see the camera. They were just taking a guess.
With the NWO Sold Out, the first one, 1997, which Bischoff has said on the show. Shout out Conrad, good buddy,
great guy.
Well, good guy. Mm-hmm. Bischoff has said it to us. He said it to Conrad. That show was horrible.
Horrible.
He just, as a producer, we know you had a lot of infamous voiceovers then. The loser, the Mexican jumping bean. It was something funny you said about Scotty Riggs. I had him on the show too. Something you said about Scotty Riggs. It was just hilarious. And
I can't remember what that one was. I do remember. I told Jericho that he should be in junior hockey or something. He should have stayed in junior hockey. Then I made fun of the Steiner brothers. I remember that. The two dog face gremlins. Something like that. That was fun because Scott reacted.
Yes, he looked back.
He looked pissed for real. That was the funny part because the Steiner brothers I've always had a good running banter with because them being from the state north of Ohio, starts with an M, and me being from Ohio, it was always a fun thing to banter back and forth with, and to get Scott dead cold in his tracks when he was walking down the aisle. He'd never heard that before because we didn't play them before they came out. We wanted to get the natural reaction of how they heard it the first time, and boy, did that one work. I loved it. I love seeing him turn around looking like funny stuff, man.
Yeah, I've been around Scott. It's been great to me. I'll tell you off, and I've seen him go off.
Yeah, I'm just lucky I'm still living right now.
Yes.
Some of the things I've said to him, joking around, he and his brother both. Good people. We have so much fun together. I tell you, we laugh our heads off, man.
The steps. Talk to me. It had to be about 30 steps that set was how, which I thought was great, the iconic, um, um, which I thought was being an art major, looking at things myself. Of you saw Bischoff giving the speech,
Mhm.
which was great. Now
Thank you.
you watch the video, you're thinking NWO ad announcement pre-recorded, but when you see the actual stage, the actual podium was on top of all of those steps, kind of like as if he was like a king, or you look at
Yeah,
standing over everybody.
yeah, that was meant to be. Yeah,
I thought it was great, but it had like 30 damn steps, and I was just
yeah. I don't know
watching
why
that.
that happened. I also didn't like the fact that little things drive me crazy sometimes. Like, for instance, the N for NWO. When it's not a small N, I was like, come on, people, it's got to be a small N because the W world is the dominant.
Yes,
I mean, it's
I
got
see.
to be NWO being the small N. And boy, I saw that big N up there. I'm going, why can't we change the light somehow to make it read small N? See, perfectionism comes in and ruins the day sometime for me.
That's fine, man. I was hoping no one slipped because I saw them steps. I was like, man,
Oh, yeah.
got the shoes, they
I
wrestling,
think they had to walk down it sideways.
man. Are you still? So you still with us? Your camera went out.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Okay, no problem. We're still here live with Neal Pruitt, the voice of
Sorry about that.
NWO. No problem.
One of my fans called me.
But yeah, that set with I said, oh my gosh, it was like WrestleMania 4 and 5 at Trump Plaza, and if you watch back at that, you can see a couple of the wrestlers trip going down those steps. I know Brett tripped. Was it Hercules? I think a couple of people tripped going down those steps 4 and 5. Those
See, the weird part about it is like what people may not realize about my career in the wrestling business is I was not a big wrestling fan. I didn't know much about it and really don't really know much about anything before I got into the business, strangely enough. I wasn't really allowed to watch it as a kid. There's a family down the road who was really into it, and they had a family full of boys too, like I did. I have an older brother, Tim, and younger brother, Keith. And we weren't allowed to watch it. The kids down the road, they watched it religiously, and one of them was trying to do an elbow drop on the other one from about 4 steps up and broke his arm doing that.
Oh man,
Wasn't something my mom really wanted to encourage, and my dad really didn't care either way. But I was lucky to have great parents, but never really watched wrestling, so I didn't know a whole lot about it. But Jody Hamilton said that the assassin said that I had a natural ability to cut the camera at the right time, but I was just honestly directing it just like any fight scene where you would do it. So it wasn't. I don't think it's so innovative that I could. It's just I just cut it at the obvious places that I thought would be good.
it was great.
But that was nice to hear, though. I was so happy. It's one of the great things about working with Jody Hamilton, whether in either iteration of Deep South or at WCW, was that he was always encouraging and understood that you had issues come up and problems that you had to solve, and he was always a great team player, and I cherish those moments talking to him and getting advice from him to this day and miss him dearly.
And there's you really can tell how influential we talked about helping people and being there for people, how influential that Jody gave to you, Jody Hamilton, the assassin.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about it multiple times and how he helped you, which is great, and it's gave and just helps you grow, and it's just growing, and the knowledge that he gave you, you can give to others. Right?
Huge impact, yeah, huge.
And that's
and to many others too. I mean, there's countless people that would say the same thing.
And he's one of the few in the business where you never hear a bad word about. Few people, whether it be the boys, the girls, promoters, producers, trainers, very few people you always say positive things about, and that's Miss Jody Hamilton. You've heard so many people talk about him, wrestlers, yourself, producer, promoters, people that wrestled against him back in the day. They've always said nothing but great things to say about him. And
He
I
was a
was
consummate professional. That's why, because he conducted business daily as a professional, true professional. No game plan, no very matter of fact. And I think his influence helped me because that's how I try to conduct myself is very matter of fact. I don't treat you any differently than when I'm talking to Hogan. Same thing, or Flair or whatever. I think people just want honesty. And if you can do that, people see that, I think, overall. And they do appreciate it. I really think so. There's a time when we were in Florida and Hogan was doing a show with Grace Slick and Carl Weathers and I think who else? Robert Vaughn from Man from Uncle, which most people wouldn't even have any idea who he was, but I did. And Hogan, my ex-wife, was with me at the time, and Hogan had to go shoot down by the ocean, and we were on a river. He made everybody in production go to the boats behind us, and just us three were on the boat with the captain and the assistant, and he was able to get away from everybody for a minute just to talk like civil people. And I think that the way I talked to Hogan before was just as a professional. And to see him do that was really quite honorable, actually, for me, because I think he knew that we had mutual respect. And that's the great thing I can say about my career in wrestling is so many people that I still talk to every now and then. We have mutual respect and admiration for professionalism. And that's a good thing to have. You can do it, but it takes effort.
Thank you for that. And that's great too that you still consider your surroundings, knowing who you are, whose you are. As you was taught, knowing who you are, those around you, and conducting yourself. And people can tell if you BSing them or being honest.
You're right.
Even if those that may not be able to tell if you're BSing them or trying to get over on them, one thing is for sure, everyone can tell and feel honesty. And if you being straight up, as you say, a matter of fact, they're going to know that. And wherever it be, as you say, your hands, because I talk about my hands as well, directed to them, or your body language, eye contact, straightforward, or, your face as you talk going towards them shows like, straight up and being upfront with you, not looking around. And, that gives a sign of dishonesty and unsureness, but being straight up, a firm handshake, and being professional. And I like that term. Is just being straight up, being a matter of fact. So I'm gonna start using it if I can.
I think it's a good place to end this.
Yes.
My phone's about ready to go, and it's just been a wonderful time talking to you. I can tell you're a sincere person that loved our business and likes promoting it and love to talk about it. It's because of people like you that made it fun for me and my friends that did this business so diligently daily. We really did try to do our best to entertain people and to take our job very seriously, even though it was a business that's obviously on the fringes of how it's conducted. But it was so much fun to do what we did, and it was an honor and a pleasure to entertain people across the world, man. It really was.
Thank you. Now, thank you much for your time. Before you go, let us know how to get in contact with you, how to listen to your show, your book, or anything else that you're affiliated with from the past and that you'll be doing in the future.
Thanks. If you can check us out on Facebook, Neal Pruitt Secrets of WCW Nitro. Neal Pruitt Secrets of WCW Nitro. And to listen to us, you can go on iTunes or iHeartRadio and Neal Pruitt Secrets of WCW Nitro. And I can't thank enough my friend and co-host of the show, Guy Evans, who was the writer of the book that's one of the best wrestling books there ever was. called Night the Inevitable Rise, the Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW. He's also written a book with Eric Bischoff recently that's really good and shows a totally different side of Eric that I think people would really greatly appreciate. So thank you for watching our shows, and thank you for enjoying our product. And boy, to even be talking about what happened in 1996 or all the way up to 2000 has been a real pleasure, and it's really cool that people even care about what we did back then. So thank you.
Neal, thank you for your time. Look forward to have you back on the show again. Everybody, you've heard the voice of the NWO, great television producer, great person in general, the great Neal Pruitt. Please check him out. Under the Mat Radio, on behalf of my staff, my company, on behalf of myself as Tech, and personally as Abin. To you, Neal, thank you. Look forward to have you back again.
Thank you, Tech. It was a lot of fun for the New World Order.
Thank you. Appreciate it, brother. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Thanks.